Good afternoon and welcome to United TV. Today we are joined by Dr. Bahnsen, a psychiatrist and candidate for Delaware State Representative in the 12th District, which is my district.
Yes.
So I'm excited to learn more about his journey from doctor to candidate, his vision for Delaware's future, and some of the key issues shaping this year's election. Throughout his work as a physician, Dr. Bahnsen was witness firsthand the challenges many Delawarean families face, from access to health care, mental health services, housing, education, and many others. Those experiences inspired him to seek public office and advocate for what describes as healthier, stronger communities throughout Delaware. Dr. Bahnsen, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing wonderful. And I want to thank you and your team for being such a great, strong informational resource for the people of my district and Delaware in general.
Absolutely. So, today is the special day for us because this is our new studio setting.
I see. It looks
As we
amazing.
were just talking about it right before the show. I never met you before, so this is our first time meeting. We actually didn't talk on the phone either. So we are meeting here. So it's a great opportunity for not just as a host here, but also someone who's involved with the politics in Delaware. And one of our goals is we want people to hear and understand what our candidates are about and who they are. And this platform is becoming one of the probably center of politics and healthcare in Delaware. So having you, and we don't have any. One of the things that we are independent, not politically independent, but from the we don't have anyone funding. So myself, so I'm doing my own funding. So that means we have freedom. So we don't owe anyone anything. That gives me a huge one responsibility, but also a freedom to do what we really should be doing and talk about the real issues.
You and I have that in common, my friend.
So
yes.
now it's also interesting that you are in healthcare. Are you employed by Christiana?
I am, yes.
So I work with Christiana with different organizations. I don't know if you remember, in the old days we have Hospitals of Delaware. It was the first hospital, so I was the head of that group. And then we had CMG, Christiana Medical Group.
Yeah.
They were also hospitalists, so I managed them for a long time. And surgical emergency service, surgeons for emergency care for 6 years. So there's always, and we never met, so it's so interesting. So it's also difficult to get people in your field, like mental health is one of the, I think there's definitely a shortage, but psychiatry and psychiatrists, that shortage is even greater. So now you are a practicing psychiatrist,
Yes.
and you made this decision to run for this election. One is, you have a really good job. You don't have to worry about financial things. You are in a good place. And now you are primarying the person who's already in that office and who's running as well. Why? Why are you doing this?
That's a great question. So I'm going to answer it this way. I grew up as the son of a machinist and a stay-at-home mom, decidedly middle-class family on Long Island, New York. My family had a lot of struggles in growing up, and it was my community, the people around me, my teachers, my guidance counselors, those people that saw something special in this young kid, and they wanted me to be something really great. They wanted me to go out and do great things in the world. And I did, because my teachers were there, because my guidance counselors were there, because my family and my friends were all there. Well, now I am where I am. I'm the first person in my family to go to college and the first doctor in my family. And I wear a lot of that on my shoulders, and I feel a lot of that in my heart. When I went to college, I went to the University of Scranton in Scranton, PA. a Jesuit school.
That's where Joe
And
Biden is from, right?
absolutely,
Right.
yep. When I walked in the building for the first time, I saw emblazoned a logo, "To whom much is given, much will be expected." So now I'm going to be 40 at the end of June. I have everything that I've ever needed in my life. And yeah, I've worked for it, but there are a lot of people that made sure that I got there too. And now I take a look at the state of the world, and I take a look at this dark cloud that seems to be looming over this country. We have the worst income inequality that we've ever had in the history of our nation. We have our first trillionaire now, while
Hmm.
children in the inner city of Wilmington and elsewhere throughout this lovely state are going hungry. I cannot rest easy knowing that there are people that are suffering,
Hmm.
while my privilege allows me to live the life that I've always wanted. So the reason that I'm running is to make sure that that ladder is extended down for every other single young boy and girl, to make sure that they had the same opportunities that I had to live out their dreams to the maximum.
So, was there any like specific like moment in the uh, medical care that you were providing that kind of just uh, made you to decide to do
Yes.
this? Because what you are going into is, in the last couple of years, we are even more involved than ever. So there's a lot of hate. There's a lot of, opposition for everything that everyone is trying to do. And anything motivated that for you
Yes. So
from the patient care standpoint?
absolutely. So I think it would become clear if I tell you a little bit more about what I do for
Yes.
a living.
Yep.
So um, I am a consultation liaison psychiatrist. And what that means is I work in Delaware's emergency rooms. I work in the intensive care units, in the surgical intensive care units. I work on the hospital floors, on the surgical floors. I'm the person in Delaware that you see first after a suicide attempt.
I
I'm the
see.
first person you see when you're in the throes of addiction. I see the very worst of the worst. And I treat the most vulnerable Delawareans that we have.
Mm.
And I've been doing that. My husband and I, we moved here in 2018. I was hired to help create my team. We started literally in a broom closet on the third floor of my hospital. It was me, a social worker, and an NP. We worked incredibly hard. We had grit, we had determination, and we succeeded where every other prior um, formulation of that team had previously failed. I didn't give up. And in so doing, we created really a powerhouse. We are now a multi-million-dollar cost center within our hospital.
Mhm.
We span multiple hospitals. We have more than quadrupled the number of doctors that do what I do in the state of Delaware, and we have now started the first ACGME accredited fellowship in psychiatry in the history of our state. I've trained dozens of young doctors. We have mentored numerous social workers and nurses, and I'm very, very proud of that work. But going in the examination room has really changed
Mhm.
since I've moved here. The kinds of cases that I was trained to treat, schizophrenia, bipolar mania, addiction, all of that stuff, it's still there. But the kinds of cases that I'm seeing now are so much more social in nature. I'm seeing suicide attempts because disability applications were denied.
Mm.
I'm seeing people who are telling me that they'd rather put a gun in their mouth than live another day on this earth because they're worried about the state of the world. They're worried about things like climate change. They're worried about limits on reproductive freedom. They're worried that, the fascists are literally going to come through our state. And it makes me think, people don't have jobs anymore. Unemployment is at record levels here in Delaware. Property taxes are through the roof. Energy bills are through the roof. Our seniors on fixed incomes are worried about having to choose between food and heat.
Mhm.
And I have to ask myself when I go home, is a prescription for Zoloft going to fix that? Or
Mhm.
am I just really serving as a cog in a machine trying to gloss over social issues with medications that I know won't work? Going down to Dover, if I win my primary, if I am victorious here, I'm taking every single one of those patient encounters with me. I remember every single one of them. They are a huge part of who I am. They have given me the politics that I have now. They have convinced me that the progressive way is the right way.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm going to work very, very hard for all of them.
So I didn't realize, exactly where you were in the flow of the patient care, and I
Mm,
think what you are describing is probably is the most difficult part. Emergency rooms are already challenging enough,
Oh, yeah.
but then when someone is there because of the psych-related issues, it's even more challenging, and then you are seeing them. So I would say maybe every encounter that you have with the patient would, bring something to the table. So now, recently, there was a huge debate, and there's some, going back and forth with Christiana Care, and I don't want to put you on the spot. So, but this
You
is
could put me on the
independent.
spot. It's my.
Yeah,
I asked for it, right?
yeah. Well, it's independent from the hospital,
Yes,
but
of course.
what I have seen, as you were describing earlier, there's a lot of access issues. The cost is crazy, and we have done some in Delaware. What we have seen is some of the bills were trying to fix some of these issues. There was one with the HB 350
Yep.
that kind of didn't go didn't go anywhere. So then the last one was SB 1, the Senate Bill 1.
Correct.
And on the Senate Bill 1, I was quite disappointed with, I was happy with the result, but I was disappointed with the position that hospitals took. So, because it was a primary care bill.
Yeah.
So my network is all about primary care. We have about 114,000 patients on a regular annual basis that we provide services.
Yeah.
With the specialist, this number goes over 200,000. Delaware population is only, 930. So we are probably 20% of Delaware go through our system.
Yes.
At any given year. So with the specific for the Senate Bill 1, as a participating physician, do you have any concerns about the bill? And especially since you were employed by the hospital, I'm kind of curious to see how you are seeing that, and any concerns that maybe we have missed.
Yes. So I think that that's an excellent question. And I think that what this touches on is the idea that having people in Dover, having people in the General Assembly who come from all different walks of life and different kinds of experiences, different lived life experience, occupational experience, and expertise makes for the best legislation in Dover. I would be the only physician in elected office in Delaware if I win this thing. And I think that that's incredibly important. Let's talk about why cost containment bills in healthcare are an important part of our financial health for the future of Delaware. Currently, I believe we are spending a little over $1.3 billion of our state budget, which our budget's around $7.1 billion per year, right? Around 11% of that, if I'm doing my math right, is spent on Medicaid. And for your listeners, what Medicaid is it is the health insurance product that is there for people who don't have the opportunity to get on a different one. It's sort of the I wouldn't say lowest rung, because it does actually
someone needs
it
to be under the
provides great
poverty level.
service,
Right.
but it is sort of the last stop, right? So what we're noticing in the state of Delaware and beyond is that Medicaid costs are increasing astronomically. In the state of Delaware, $1.3 billion a year, and it's increasing by, I believe, anywhere from 1% to 5% per year. And every single year, it is escaping the limits that we set on it. We're spending more than we're expecting year after year after year. So there's really only a couple of reasons why that could be. One, we could have a discussion about how more people are on Medicaid now in Delaware than ever before. And that is, again, symptomatic of social ills. Businesses drying up in Delaware. Folks can't find good paying jobs in Delaware. It leads them to not be able to, provide for their families. And when they can't provide for their families, well, then Medicaid may be the last thing. So we have more people on Medicaid, but I also think we're having increased utilization of Medicaid resources for people on that insurance plan to start with. And that's actually a large part of what I plan on doing with my legislative efforts in Dover. It's about efficiency. I can tell you, as a psychiatrist who works in the emergency room, there is so much inefficiency with the way that we handle patient care in Delaware. I'm telling you, treating people with schizophrenia, treating people with severe persistent mental illness, what ends up happening is is people go from the psychiatric hospital back to the community. From the community, they end up either sometimes in the legal system, sometimes back in my emergency room. And at every step of the way, the Delaware taxpayer is paying thousands of dollars at each step. And we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have it in place yet to actually just get people back on their feet. The laws are not there. When the laws are there, they're not being enforced well enough. The legal system is not talking with the clinical side. The clinical side is not talking with the administrative side. Dover doesn't seem to know what's going on with any of that anyway. And what that ends up costing us is money. And we see it every year with increasing costs to Medicaid. Now, getting back to cost containment, I think that Dover has actually tried a couple of pretty good ideas. I think that House Bill 350 was, in theory, a good idea. For your listeners, what House Bill 350 was it was an effort last year to give the governor power to appoint people to a cost review board. And that cost review board was meant to be given the power to veto budgets of hospitals when they felt that we were spending too much money on things. Now, the problem with that, right, since there was not a physician in the General Assembly, there were not people who really truly understood how healthcare is delivered. That bill ultimately failed, and there were issues with that. With House Bill 350, what would happen if we had a Republican governor at some point that decided to appoint a board that restricted abortion care in the state of Delaware, that restricted gender-affirming care in the state of Delaware? They would never need to pass a bill. It would be a Trojan horse. You would just say Christiana Care, Bay Health, and BB, you can no longer fund these services. So House Bill 350 was a bad bill, not in theory, but in execution. SB 1 is another one of those things, and it has me a little worried. So let's talk a little bit about how hospitals are funded. We are all part of an intrinsically broken healthcare system. I'm a Medicare for all guy. I believe that healthcare is a human right. As a state representative, I can't give Delawareans Medicare for all, but I certainly think that we need to start to elect folks that start saying things like healthcare is a human right and that everybody deserves healthcare no matter who they are.
And also, it doesn't have to be this expensive.
Exactly. Right. Even the Koch brothers, their own think tank, said that Medicare for all would be a cheaper, more efficient solution for America. And this is them. I mean, but regardless, we're in a scenario now where we tried this cost containment bill with SB 1. And what it purported to do was lower the amount of money that hospitals can charge for certain procedures, right? So you have, in current state, hospitals could charge 450% of the rate of Medicare, right? For things like a cardiac catheterization or chemotherapy or what have you. And the idea was, well, if we can constrain the big bad hospitals from making all this money, then we can have all this money left to invest in primary care, largely in the rural areas of Delaware. On the surface, that sounds great, right? But the problem is this: that money that was being used in cardiac catheterization and chemotherapy care, that money was not going into the CEO's pocket. That money was actually going to subsidize teams like mine that treat vulnerable people without insurance. My collections rate as a psychiatrist in the hospital is about 50%. I get back about 50% of the bills that I charge, and we expect that. We budget for it. It is what it is. Senate Bill 1, I think, didn't fully understand that when you lower the amount of money that hospitals can make on procedures that can make money, that there will then be less money to subsidize care for vulnerable Delawareans in a healthcare system that's failing us. So what I would have done is something a little different. I would have sat down with the leadership in the Senate and the House, and I would have just simply explained to them, listen, this is what the potentially unintended consequences would be with that. Let's talk about alternative solutions.
So, a couple things.
Yes.
Because on the SB 1, I did a lot of work for that. So, the part that's not so clear for everyone is
Yeah.
there is already two different fee schedule,
Hmm.
meaning that there's, let's say I own a surgery center, American Surgery Center. You probably see me on 95. I get,
You are a
messages from,
celebrity, my man.
so I get messages from people, oh, we just saw you. So I'm like, where?
Yeah.
So the thing is, the surgery center, if someone has a gallbladder surgery, in our surgery center, Medicare pays us $2,800. So same gallbladder already with the Medicare fee schedule is $15,000 average. So when we talk about 250% of that 6 times higher
Mm.
fee schedule, that number is so big. Now, I'm kind of focusing on the position that you are going into with the Senate than where you are today, because I think there will be a huge, maybe reality check at some point, because, like, for example, why is St. Francis Hospital struggling, right? So if it's about the fee schedule, the St. Francis Hospital would own like 15% of the market. That puts them in a really good position, but they are not. So, and then when we look at like the, again, I'm not gonna go after your employer, but you guys did so great, like 1,250,000,000 profit in 5 fiscal years.
Yeah.
That speaks for something. And I always say, we always have a horse in the race. We are not, we have our own. We represent outpatient practices, and also we know that we need the hospitals, like the position that you are talking about in the ED, emergency department. That's not something that outpatient is able to do.
No, it's not. The hospital would literally grind to a halt
Right.
if my team did not exist and we
And
couldn't get
that's
people
why
to
we
care.
need, hospitals should be
Yeah.
there for those really like severe situations, critical situations, emergencies. But if, we talk about, Medicare patients, so in the example of gallbladder, the 20%, Medicare pays 80% of the allowable. So the 20% in the surgery center is what, $600 about, and the 20% of 15,000 is 3,000 in the hospital setting. So then the copay becomes bigger than what we get paid in the surgery center. So that's one of the big issues that I think SB1 was trying to address, and I think it will address. And because it puts some responsibility on the parties, so that, we shouldn't be like having full freedom. Like, for example, I mean, you see our studio. So if I was at Christiana, or let's use Bay Health, so then,
Sure.
so it's
Okay.
not your. If I was part of Bay Health, I would
I do
spend.
like my job.
Let's use UPenn. So if I was at UPenn, this thing is very inexpensive. It's less than $250.
Okay.
I would spend $5,000 for that
Okay.
in the hospital setting. So how I know is that because I bought a TV for our surgeon's call room in one of the local hospitals, and I'm like, how did it cost like, $6,000? Because they have to go through so many process, and then 4 committees later you get a TV, and it's so expensive. I mean, this TV is like $500. So, I mean, hospitals are like like, entire, nation, they spend a lot of money.
You know what would fix all of this? Which would get all of us on the same side again, all people interested in the health of Delawareans? Medicare for all.
I don't know. I need to look into that a little bit more. I don't know if it would, because right now, like, that's the other thing that you were talking about Medicaid earlier. So 1/3 of the state is almost on Medicaid.
Yeah.
And another 22% is on Medicare. And that number is increasing with the retirees moving to Delaware. So more than half already is on Medicare, actually, because Medicaid is, funded partially from the federal government. So, but it still doesn't, because, you probably have a lot of cases where that with the social determinant of health, what we trying to focus on is this is not all about everyone is getting something. Whereas, like in this room, hey, I'm the oldest one in the room. Good job. So I need different things than is Mel the youngest one? I don't know, maybe.
She
Let's
probably
use
is.
her as the youngest one.
Yeah.
She needs different things, I need different things.
Yeah.
We don't need it at same level.
Yeah.
Or let's say Ethan is 28. He's not going to, if we have certain resources, we don't have to evenly distribute them because we don't need it at the same level. So that's why when we just give things to everyone at the same level, I don't like, we have Medicaid patients, they really don't know what they have. And I'll tell you this, and I don't wish this, but Medicaid is the best insurance in the state of Delaware because they don't have copays, they don't have co-insurance. You cannot even send them a bill, even if that's that's their responsibility. Let's say if they didn't change certain things, and we need to send a COB, like the coordination of benefits. It's illegal to send a bill to the Medicaid. Like we can call them, obviously. So, but then payments, I think the state of Delaware Medicaid program actually is not bad at all. So compared to other states, but too expensive.
It is ballooning in costs.
It's like, can we afford this? And does it have to be this expensive? And I definitely would like to, go into more details with you outside of this setting, so that
I would love
we
to.
can go through the question. But this is important, so I'm so glad that you are open to listen. And
A large part of my legislative priorities will be bringing decades of institutional experience, literally working within the belly of the beast,
right.
to help make things leaner, to help make things more efficient, to increase access and decrease costs at the same time, promote things like preventative care, hold the people that need to be held accountable. Make sure that Delaware knows that they can go to hospitals here in their backyard, in their home, and get world-class care. I've been working on that largely in silence since 2018 with my team. We've created an army of psychiatrists that are now going throughout the state of Delaware to provide legitimate, world-class mental health care. Now we need to do that on a larger scale, and I hope to do that in Dover.
So one of the other issues, that this is a personal problem that I see, and I witnessed this, is gambling in Delaware.
Yes.
I know maybe the state is looking at it as like, money making. And different governors went through and things didn't change, but there's also online gambling issue. Now Delaware is a Delaware Park. That place is I'm into the horses, but that's more than horses, but it's all about gambling. And there's more and more. I had one of my friends long time ago spend entire salary on a single night. Zero exaggeration. And I was helping during that time to oversee the finances of this friend, and I couldn't believe, like, I think it was $2,700,
Yeah.
and spending that, working for the entire month, and then so in this school system they are paid monthly. So boom, I saw that money going out. I was sad, I was upset, I was shocked. And I was also like, I'm like, how can this happen to someone like this person? Now, as a psychiatrist, are you concerned about the mental health impacts of gambling addiction in Delaware?
Absolutely. And I think it's important for your listeners to understand that, gambling is an addiction disorder. It is classified in our DSM in the same section as substance use disorders. And when you take a look at the neurophysiology of gambling, well, gosh, it hits the same pleasure centers in the brain that cocaine does. I mean, it is the same hit. So when people have issues with being able to control their gambling, our people should think of it in the same exact way as a substance use disorder, because in many ways it is the same thing physiologically in the brain. The thing that worries me the most, though, is the rise of these new prediction markets, Kalshi and Polymarket, these institutions that have somehow found a very clever way to skirt the label of gambling. They call themselves prediction markets, and by doing so, they actually escape state level regulation completely. They are regulated by a federal body that is largely run by Trump administration appointees. And I think we also know when we follow the news that a lot of his cronies have actually been using those markets to make a lot of money by calling world events and then having the president make those world events actually happen. Now, I think that
I mean,
those.
Trump took this whole, craziness to a different level with his team. So I used to kind of like,
I mean,
not go really crazy on him, but in the last couple of months, I'm like, what the hell is happening? So
his policies are literally unraveling the social fabric of our nation, and it's doing it right in front of our eyes. I mean, we have such a rich history in this nation. People who fought and died for our freedoms, fought and died for the right for me to get married to the man that I love, fought for a woman's right to choose autonomy over her own body, for a woman's right to vote, the abolition of slavery here on Juneteenth today. And we have this man in the White House that is just. He is run roughshod
but
over
what's
everything
interesting
that we've
about him?
loved.
What's interesting about him for me is like he's married 3 times and in the business of casino gambling.
Right.
A lot of prostitution, a lot of alcohol, a lot of drugs are happening in his hotels or used to. And
there's folks who think of him as pious.
that is the scary part. So kind of like
Right.
that means he has a really good marketing team to put this out there. I just can't, even from the first term, I'm like, how is he gonna get over the issues with gambling, drugs, and all the stuff that's happening in the hotels? I mean, last time I was at the Atlantic City Taj Mahal, was it? So it's closed now, right? So I had my parents, and when you have people coming from overseas, you need to take them to places.
Yeah.
So I took them to Atlantic City, and they're conservative people, and like in the hotel lobby, before I go from the check-in to the elevator, I had at least 25 prostitutes approach me in front of my parents. This is the business that they have. So now they are being the saint, and some crazy stuff happening. I don't know how they go through, but I think it's a good marketing, I guess. But things are really not so great from that point. So,
You know what I think the problem is? I think that the rise of Trumpism has a lot of things going into it, but I think the largest part of the problem is that the Democrats have not been loud enough. We have not been bold enough. We have not been ambitious enough. We have not been willing to say things like healthcare is a human right. ICE doesn't belong here. Now it is sort of du jour for these politicians that have been around for a long time to take the mantle of progressive causes and use them to get reelected because they're popular now. But who was actually there fighting on the front lines when Trump was actually in office? For me personally, and I can only talk for me personally, I was helping people not commit suicide. I was helping folks out of addiction. When people found that our country was in the toilet, when the jobs were disappearing, when income inequality continued to grow, my team was working to help people stay alive. We need to have Democrats in local elections, in national elections, in county elections, and everywhere in between. We need to have a fresh set of eyes on the problems that we face. I believe that so strongly. It's why I'm running in this race. We need to have new ideas, and we need to go back to a party that fights for working class families, for truth, reason, and rationality in our politics, that turns away from corporate donations and lobbyist donations. We need people who are just there to represent the communities that they love. And it's as simple as that.
So now that I'm going to shift to education, which
For sure
is going to be needed for all these things that we've been talking about.
Yes.
So, I've been in Delaware since 1998. So I'm a Delawarean by choice. So I think that's more important than just being born in Delaware.
I
So,
was 12 years old when you moved here.
all right. So you see, like,
Been here for a
I
long
also
time.
almost 28 years that I've
Yep.
been here. So it's a beautiful state. But the education and public school system is always a problem. Now,
Yeah.
I don't have kids, and this year I'm paying even more school taxes. And I'm like, maybe I should just get a couple kids. Like, like
So
if I'm going to pay this
at least
much,
you can get something out of it.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Right. Right.
so, um, you know, we are paying good amount of tax. I know it's less than PA and maybe other places, but still a lot of taxes. Now, you propose treating educators more like we treat doctors, so then
Yes.
including better pay, continuing education opportunities, maybe smaller class sizes. Now, when we look at education, what do you think Delaware is getting wrong when it comes to supporting teachers and strengthening the public education?
Great question. Um, you know, when I was researching my race, I made sure that education was a major plank of my platform and my vision for the future of Delaware. And it's for personal reasons. I mean,
Hmm.
I told you in the beginning that it was my teachers in public schools. I'm the product of a public school education in New York State. That's where I grew up. I know what it looks like
Hmm.
when our public schools work. And even though my parents, they struggled with a lot of things, the one thing they never struggled with was knowing that their three boys went on safe buses to safe schools near their home with teachers that were paid well to be passionate about the development of the children in their classroom.
Hmm.
And the reason why I say this on my website, and I mean it wholeheartedly with every bit of my being, that we should treat our teachers like we treat our doctors, is because every future physician, every future attorney, engineer, every scientist, every single human being's development begins in the classroom.
Hmm.
And it's that teacher that is the first person that really starts that journey for that child. When I started this race, we were 47th out of 50th in public education
That's
in the
so bad,
nation.
isn't it?
47th.
There's
47th.
that 50 total, 51.
Right.
Yeah.
50, right? So we were in last place. And when I took a look at the NEA statistics regarding things like reading and math, it was alarming to me. When I started this race, only 20% of Delaware's fourth graders knew how to read at a fourth grade level. 13% of our high schoolers didn't graduate on time. 5% of our children didn't have health insurance. 3% of our children in Delaware live in extreme poverty.
Hmm.
What future do we have as a state when only a fifth of our fourth graders know how to read? I mean, it's not good for our children. And also, with regards to business in Delaware and industry in
Hmm.
Delaware, I think it's actually a large part of the reason why businesses are leaving us and have been for a long, long time. When you take a look at the Delaware industry,
Hmm.
we used to have chemical companies, we used to have banking and credit cards and all of that.
Right.
All of that has left us. We're left with only a few industries now. And I think a large part of the reason is because we don't have young families moving into Delaware again. Our population is aging. We don't have children being raised in Delaware. We don't have young families. And
Hmm.
without that, you don't have a reliable and stable workforce. Without a reliable and stable workforce, if you're a business owner, why move here? I think that fixing our public schools is a priority, not just because it's the right thing to do for our children, but because it literally is the key to the future of Delaware industry as well. With regards to what we're doing wrong with our teachers, I don't think I would frame it like that. I think that actually a lot of good work has been done, and I think that people in Dover are really starting to wake up that this is a major problem. I really appreciate what Matt Meyer did. He fought the Republicans in the General Assembly. He ensured that starting teacher pay would go up to $60,000 a year. That puts us on par with California. It ensures that young teachers actually move here and want to be here and start their lives here and stay here. That's a big one. Senator Laura Sturgeon, she worked so hard hard to get the hybrid funding formula fixed and also secured the funding to make sure that well-performing schools stay whole during the process. That's the kind of stuff that sparks a public education revolution in our state. We need to make sure that we elect leaders that are willing to take the hard votes to see it through completely.
So, I think you said it very well, where, there's parents, and I think after the parents, especially elementary school teachers, well, all of them, but the first 5 years, I guess, is it still 5 years? So this is what happens when you don't have kids, or you don't know how
It's
many.
five.
Five.
It's
So,
5 years, yeah.
so in Turkey they changed it. So I think it's four, 4, and 4. So there's a
Okay.
12-year mandatory, and then it used to be 5. So um, I remember the elementary school teacher name, the person. I remember her very well.
Mhm.
I don't know if I liked her much. So I was a little bit smarter than my rest of the class, and I skipped the first grade. So then she just she wasn't really great. So now I was gonna go somewhere else with this one, but
I can't wait to hear it, man.
so like she did have some negative impact on me. I think I could have done better if the teacher was uh, better educated.
Yeah.
So because like someone like me in that class, and then I always skip the first one. She was struggling and she didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
So I get bored in the classroom, and they give me a lot of stupid tasks, and I'm like, so this is boring. So, and if there was a really solid person, which that's why I'm trying to say that it's really important to have good people with good foundation, and in order to do that, you really need to pay them well. I think there's this like almost like the police and the teachers, they're kind of like not treated financially. They're not treated well.
They're also not treated with respect. I've knocked on so many doors in my district. I've met probably every Democrat in my district twice or even 3 times now. And I've met so many educators, teachers who tell me that administration doesn't back them up. They're trying to help children who are struggling, but various social factors lead parents to be unable to take part in the culture of the schools. And everybody knows that what's going on is social in nature. It's economic in nature. And yet nobody is willing to make sure that parents have good jobs, that folks don't have to work 3 or 4 jobs and come home at midnight just to put food on the table. We had a scenario a couple years ago, or I think this was last year, when the General Assembly debated school meals in Delaware. The bill was to provide breakfast and lunch to every child in school in Delaware. And one of the things that enraged me about this, and that's a strong word, I don't mean to be dramatic, but I was enraged by it. There was actually a discussion about if there was the quote-unquote political will to feed our children in our schools. There are some children, I told you 3% of our children in Delaware live in extreme poverty, right? But even children in my own district, I mean, they have parents who are, neurosurgeons or whatever, who go off to work and they have to take care of themselves, right? There are children in our schools whose only meals ever come from the lunch lady in the cafeteria. And there was actually a discussion amongst Democrats in Delaware about if there was the political will to feed our children lunch. So what they did was they compromised. They compromised on our children's nutrition. They were willing to pass breakfast, but not lunch. Come on. Come on. I believe the cost around that would have been around $67 million a year on a $7.1 billion budget. You want to talk about fixing our public schools? How about making sure that when kids take these tests and are trying to learn, that they're not hungry? Right? This is what I'm talking about Democrats getting back to doing what Democrats do best. We need to be talking to working class families again. We need to be doing truth and reason. We need to have a data-driven, pragmatic approach about the things that we do, and our children deserve it. This isn't about laws that look good on Instagram. This isn't about laws that make you get reelected. This is about laws that help create the infrastructure for a tomorrow for our state.
So, speaking of kids and social media, uh, what are the main concerns that you have with kids having access to everything that you and I and everyone in this room have access, and there's really no good restriction? How do you think that could be controlled or monitored,
Yeah,
or what can we do, especially since you are the
yeah.
this is your field, so from the clinical side, what are the things that can be done?
Well, I think all that I can share is that the data is actually very clear. The research is very clear
Mhm,
that a young developing mind that is exposed to things like artificial intelligence,
mhm,
social media, you see increased rates of mental health and behavioral conditions across the board.
mhm.
Um, it does that mean that we ban social media for children? I don't know. I don't know.
Now, I
I
think
mean,
in Europe now they have the 16
yeah,
years old
yeah,
limit, and in Turkey they are doing something similar to
yeah,
that. But how can we protect kids,
yeah,
like someone who's 10, 11, and they have the same phone with same access,
yeah.
and parents are not there all the time?
Well, it actually goes back to what we were talking about with regards to gambling, right? So a great example of that. Um, I believe it was Kalshi. They were caught providing a contract to a 15-year-old Instagram influencer to
Mhm,
influence young children to participate in this market,
mhm,
right? So that has to be regulated in a way. When you have clear, convincing data that shows that a product of any kind, be it social media or some kind of just anything at all, is harmful to children. And by its very nature, we consider children to be um, vulnerable, right? We have to protect them. I'm not sure if that's the government's job to do that. I do know for sure that it's a parent's job, and it's certainly our job to make sure that parents have the information that they need and the tools that they need. I do think that appropriate age filters and appropriate blocks are necessary
mhm.
for these things if parents choose to have them. But I also think that we run into a problem of government overreach with it as well. I want parents to know the information. I want them to be able to make decisions for their children, and I want them to be able to raise their children the way that they want, with a clear understanding too that exploitation of children from big corporations
Mhm.
that are exploiting them for financial gain and setting them up in the future, of which we have quite a number of examples, like, for example, the tobacco industry.
Mhm.
Um, that has to be that has to be controlled.
And also, like social media companies, they have a lot of responsibilities as well. And I think with the way that technology is right now, monitoring them is almost next to impossible.
Yeah,
So,
which is at the it's at the source of my answer. It's not necessarily that we need to hold people accountable for harming our children with products that they know are harming our children. Um, period.
but also, like, can we even identify them?
But
We
how would
can't.
we do
Yeah,
it?
that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So, they are Sam Altman is smarter than us right now, unfortunately.
He ain't smarter than
And
me.
so Zuckerberg is same, like
Sorry,
this
Sam
is
Altman.
so like they have a way of control things that we don't have a way of monitoring what they are doing. So
Yeah.
it's gonna be tough. So in some ways, it's really difficult to raise kids in this type of setting. But the reality is, everyone should be able to.
Yeah, and one thing that I have seen in my evaluations, especially when I evaluate young children, when we're dealing with issues with social media,
Mhm,
we're usually dealing with issues of attention deficit as well. Kids now require this sort of immediate gratification. There's a lack of patience. There's a lack of ability to be willing to sit in discomfort for long enough to find the answer. We have access to the world. We have access to the sum total of human knowledge and imagination in our
Hmm.
pockets. You have one right there. I have one in mine. And our
I have
children
two
do
right
too.
now.
Right.
So
And it's one of those things where, that's nice to have when you have a fully developed set of frontal lobes in a brain and you're just trying to sort of get through your workday. That's fine. But when you're still developing critical thinking skills, I don't want to allow our children to have this sort of secondhand critical thinking that is
mhm.
ultimately owed to a computer screen instead of actually learning these skills themselves when they should be in their normal human development.
And again, just one last thing with this one is
Sure.
what I see is all these difficulties is putting more pressure on us to have a better education system, and
Yeah.
that means we have to have better, better equipped, better educated teachers, and in order to do that, they need to be supported. So that's like challenge is not like when I was a kid, we didn't have internet. So the only thing that we need to be
Yeah.
home by a certain time. We were able to play outside
Yeah.
safely. Uh, just before your dad comes home, you have to be home and clean.
I remember that. Yes.
So that was our biggest challenge. So of course, in the
Yeah.
on the street outside, things can happen,
Yeah.
but that was very rare, right? So now you have a kid, it's like so many different things out there, and if parents, it starts actually with the parents, they need to be better educated. Like when I one of my Turkish episodes that we did recently, the parents don't have luxury to say, "No, I don't want to learn new stuff."
Yep.
Well, if you don't, like, how are you gonna, raise kids?
Yep. So I am a millennial. I'm going to be 40 at the end of this month. Actually, next Wednesday, I'm going to be 40 years old.
Well, happy
And
birthday
thank
in
you.
advance.
Thank you. Thank you. I was the last generation that grew up without cell phones,
Mm,
that grew up without the internet, and I was also the first generation to have them. I had a pretty normal childhood out on my bike and running around in the woods with my friends and doing all that stuff. And it helped me to develop in a way that, allowed me to take on the rigor of medical school and the rigor of starting a practice and yes, the rigor of running for office. But I worry about that now. I worry that, we have relegated critical thinking skills
mhm,
to some machine. And I wonder what that's going to set our children up for as they grow of age and have
mhm.
to start solving the problems that we're leaving them.
So, I know, I think we have to bring you back,
Yes.
because there's so much
I go
things to
on
talk.
tangents a lot. I'm sorry. I talk a
No, no,
lot.
this is like I have so many questions and then it's
Yes.
already an hour.
Yeah,
So, but I do want to ask you one last
for
question.
sure.
You propose ending corporate money in Delaware
Yes.
elections,
Yes.
auditing major government contractors, and holding regular meetings with the voters. What changes would voters actually notice if those reforms were in place?
I think, with the most blunt frankness that I can share with you, they would have a representative with authenticity and integrity. And they would know that when I go down to Dover and I speak on that checkerboard floor in the General Assembly, I'm speaking as their voice, that I am not bought, I am not paid for. I am simply my own person who is running because he is scared for the state of the world and wants to help heal our community. I believe strongly
Mhm.
that corporate money in our politics is the root of all of our problems on both sides of the aisle. I will never take a single dime of corporate money. I will never take a single dime of PAC money. I am simply just somebody who wants to put a little bit of light into this world and bring decades of institutional experience to help give us good health care, help to be a progressive voice that helps to fix our public schools once and for all, and helps to make sure that there are good economic policies that lift all boats. Because, we live in the wealthiest area of Delaware. We
Mhm.
literally live in the wealthiest, most influential area of Delaware. And if my neighbors choose to send a progressive Democrat to Dover, I'm going with a message. I'm
Mhm.
going with a message that corporate influence in our politics is no longer going to be the Delaware way.
So there's again, like there's so much out there that needs to happen before September.
Mm-hmm.
And we bring everyone, and Krista Griffith was here,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't meet her before.
Mm-hmm.
It was just similar to this. And I think I like everyone, so that's one of my issues usually is like uh, before I meet people, I don't have much opinion, but
Yeah.
once we meet and sit down, we have opinions. And this is, this is the Democrat race. So like whoever gets the primary is going to be.
Yeah.
And I know everyone means well, and we want to be able to. I mean, having a physician from our side, I'll tell you, like, I'm not going to hold you responsible for the Christiana side, but having a physician in the Senate is important.
House.
So,
House.
right?
Yes.
So, I think that would be a change, and that may be needed.
And
Um,
if I may too, you know, these political races sometimes end up being very contentious.
mhm,
I want to say to all of your listeners, I think that Krista Griffith is a good person. I think she works hard in Dover. I think she's fought for women who are the victims of domestic violence, and she's fought for children with special needs. She's fought for the disabled community in many ways, like nobody ever has in the history of
mhm,
Delaware politics. She's a good person. But I also think that there is a significant contrast between what we would bring to Dover with our expertise and also what we stand for and what we believe Democrats need to do next in the face of Trumpism. I do not believe in corporate donations for campaigns. I believe that no matter how good of a person you are, it changes how you think.
of course.
Without a doubt. I think that Democrats need to be louder, bolder, and more ambitious. I think that we need to be actually coming to the people with a plan and with a vision. I have an actual platform. I have ideas. I have things that I want to do in Delaware. I want to bring new industry to Delaware. I want to convince the people of Delaware that the progressive cause makes good business sense. It's not just the morally and ethically right thing to do,
Mhm.
but it also makes good business sense that when you invest in people directly, that is the best return on our dollar that we could possibly have. When we have universal pre-K in Delaware, we solve the child care issue in this state, and we allow Delaware industry to come here and flourish again. We expand our tax base. We expand our revenues. We have more resources to care for our seniors and people with disabilities and our veterans as well. We need to have bold change. The same old is never going to get us out of where we're in now, where it feels very much like our state is withering on the vine. I don't accept that.
And this was very informative for me personally. And sometimes it's kind of fun not knowing anything about the person who's coming. There are questions, of course, we have, but I don't go through them all the time. So I have my own stuff and I don't tell them. And it's fun to learn a lot of stuff that we are already doing.
Yes.
And I think you are going to have a good race, and we would like you to invite you to one of our provider meetings. We meet once a quarter, usually the Newcastle meeting. We have Zoom meetings on a regular basis, but
Yes.
once a quarter we meet in person. And if you would like to come in and give like 10 to 12 minutes in the beginning of it. So usually we have 50 to 60 providers in those meetings. I would welcome you to at least introduce you. Some of them you may already know, some of the providers that we have. But it would be a good opportunity for you to reach out to them and then for them to know who you are.
Yeah.
So this is all about having the right people in the right place.
That's
And
exactly what it's
it was
about.
a great pleasure for you to have you here in the show, and then with the new studio setting. So hopefully this
And
would
also,
be.
can we get a round of applause for your team for this amazing new
They did a
studio?
great
This
job.
was
So
fantastic.
thank you, Phil, Ethan, and
Yes.
Zal, and
Yes.
who else is there? everyone did a really great job, and
Yes.
it's this is why it's important to have good people in the right place.
Yes.
So I wish you well, and hopefully you'll do well.
Thank you, friend. And I would love to join your meeting. I'll always show up for you.
Absolutely, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you for watching us, and we'll be back with another Bariatric Friday show with Dr. Ergan right after this. Thank you. Stay united.